The year is 2018. A man goes into a pub, orders a beer, and watches his beloved Arsenal play Everton. Arsenal win 2-0. He does not raise his glass when anything exciting happens. He does not speak to anyone, and he wears a large hoodie the entire match. The reason he was there? He couldn't afford the subscription for Sky Sports. That man was Emmanuel Abue, former Arsenal defender, beloved Arsenal defender at that. This man is estimated to have made over £20 million over his career. He only retired in 2016, 2 years prior. It's a tragedy, but it's not an isolated incident. We've all heard it before. Pro athlete is given tens of millions of dollars, pounds, euros, whatever, over a period of 10 or 15 years or so, but only a few years after said athlete retires, he's filing for bankruptcy for one reason or another. It's a fact that continues to boggle the minds of a lot of fans and non-fans alike. In 2009, Sports Illustrated released an article on the phenomena of retired player financial management. In it, they stated that through research, they found that 78% of former NFL players have either gone bankrupt or are under some sort of financial distress within 2 years of retiring. Do you know how insane that is? Divorce and being jobless afterwards were cited as the main causes. Closer to the topic at hand, footballers, that is, I found a 2018 study conducted by Dr. Matteo Baglio of the University of Antwerp on the financial circumstances of professional footballers. After 102 players from the Belgian First Division were surveyed, research showed that almost 1 in 4 players were actively struggling with financial problems. Clubs are aware of this and seem to be doing what they can, but as you can imagine, there is only so much they can do. In this video, I wanted to do 2 things. 1. Really dive into some research pertaining to why athletes tend to squander their millions, and 2. Look at some examples of high-profile and maybe some not-so-high-profile players that have been affected by this. Yo, what is going on everyone? Hope you're all doing well. I'm Tinashe, welcome back to the channel. First things first, I just want to put a disclaimer here. We never truly know the full extent of the truth when we hear about players reportedly being bankrupt or losing all their fortunes. Same way we never truly know what someone's net worth is. Forbes and all of those online platforms that claim they know, they don't. Do you guys remember Asamoah Gyan? Maybe you might only remember him for his missed penalty against Uruguay in the 2010 World Cup quarterfinals, a truly iconic moment in time. Well, back in 2018, there were rampant reports of him having lost everything. He played for 18 years for clubs all around the world and was once one of the highest paid players on the planet, earning a reported £230,000 per week from Shanghai Port during the boom in Chinese Super League mega spending. He's apparently tried his hand at several businesses, went through divorce, and seems to be the classic tale of a bankrupt athlete, right? I mean, at one point he apparently only had £600 left in the bank. Yikes. But maybe not yikes. We all have to stop and ask ourselves an important question. Where are we getting all of this information from? The Mirror and the Daily Mail. I mean, these guys are known to make stories up from time to time. And Gyan's response to all of this at the time? This tweet. Who knows what's true and what isn't? I mean, the same goes for reported salaries too. Have any of you seen an actual football contract or a player's bank account? Ronaldinho reportedly squandered $100 million earned over his career from playing and endorsements due to poor spending habits and failed investments. Based on what we see in the news all the time, that doesn't sound outlandish, but again, who knows? I also want to preface that this video wasn't made to dunk on people that have had their lives upended. If what we see in the newspapers is true about how much money these guys lose, it's no laughing matter. That's pretty serious. I mean, I might make jokes from time to time in this video, but only because my card declined when I took a girl out for McDonald's once when I was in high school. If I didn't have the bad back, my life could have been different. Trust me, bro. So let's go into detail about some of the main reasons that former players, even active players, end up like this. Heck, John Onorisa was declared bankrupt in 2007 while he was still a Liverpool player. That same year, Liverpool played in a Champions League final, and it was only 2 years after he helped Liverpool complete the Miracle of Istanbul. More on him a bit later. First up, post-retirement planning. Post-sports retirement planning is a concept that's foreign to the vast majority of us. mostly because the majority of professional athletes have a very small earning window and most of them are retired by the time they're 30. Regardless of if you're in a white or blue collar profession, most of us will probably only be starting to step into senior roles by then. Plus, there is a 30-year-plus career path still in store. But that just might be where the problem lies. There is no set post-retirement career path for someone that was once a professional athlete. For a lot of these guys, they haven't been taught anything but ball their entire life. They may be encouraged to seek alternative endeavors in preparation while they are still playing, but how many of you are gonna take an interest in anything else if your main occupation is netting you upwards of £60,000 per week, especially if it's the only thing you've ever really done in life? Are you really going to be motivated to try anything new? This article was written about 5 years ago, by the way. According to Statista, last season at Manchester United, the average base salary was £7.2 million per season, per player, roughly 135k per week. This season, Marcus Rashford sits on 375k per week and still refuses to track back. It's unbelievable. The players at the top, like Rashford for example, will probably always be fine. They're so well known, they'll probably be taken care of for the rest of their lives, but we also have to remember that not everyone is a top earner. For every 72 million euro per year Kylian Mbappe, there is a struggling semi-pro Championnat National bricklayer. Clubs are savvy to these post-retirement issues and offer the early career financial planning that you'd expect they should from a young age, but not everyone is inclined to listen to them. And then of course we have players on lower wages that undoubtedly participate in the age-old tradition of keeping up with peer spending. We'll dive into that later, but that's a pretty huge problem too. So at the ripe old age of 30 to 35, when you've been earning £60,000 per week and spending roughly £60,000 per week for almost a decade, when the checks all of a sudden stop coming in, do you think your barber is gonna answer your calls? Having said that, the opportunities for these guys are endless, right? Some players become managers, some become pundits, some club CEOs, many start and run lucrative businesses with their career earnings. Some even enter the WWE, but some don't do anything at all. But they live and spend like they do. Family and divorce. I think these two should be in the same category. Going back to the quoted study from the intro from the Belgian league, roughly 40% of players said that they provide financial support to extended family outside of children and spouses, and 25% completely support friends financially. Truth be told, the inspiration of this video actually came from a portion of Rio Ferdinand's 5 podcast, which aired on the 16th of November 2023. On the show, he had Chelsea and Nigeria legend Mikel John Obi on. They spoke briefly about player finances and responsibilities, but made special reference to the family expectations that a player experiences when they make it big.
This is something I don't think we speak a lot about. When you come from Africa, when you make money, it's not your money, and your sisters, they go off and they get married to some guy, who just wants to get married to John Obi Mikel's family, because then my life is sorted.
Family back home making all sorts of claims is not uncommon among African players, a lot of whom come from tough backgrounds before moving to Europe and making it big. Victor Osimhen was recently accused of cheating his brother-in-law out of a cool $500,000 USD. Apparently, this was for a commission for his role in Osimhen's transfer from Lille to Napoli. Emmanuel Adebayor claims that his brother held him at knife point over money when he was playing at Monaco. However, we all need to note that remittance, or sending money back home, is a global phenomenon. It's nowhere near an African thing. According to the World Bank, for the calendar year of 2022, remittance income sent back to the East and Asia Pacific regions soared to roughly 134 billion USD. Europe and Central Asia sat at $72 billion, and Sub-Saharan Africa came in at $53 billion. If you come from poverty in the underbelly of London, Glasgow, New York, Buenos Aires, Helsinki, Tokyo, Johannesburg, etc., and etc., you will have friends and family that likely think they are owed something due to your success. And who knows, maybe they are. I mean, let's be real, it does take a village to raise a child. Maybe there were people that were taking you to and from practice. Maybe there were people that were protecting you against going into a life of crime. That's a pretty drastic example, but it's true. Maybe those people deserve to be supported or helped out because of what they did for you early on. But when those same people believe that a family member or a player, in this example, is responsible for taking care of them for the rest of their lives and financially supporting them, that can become a bit of a problem. Divorce is the reason that a lot of people will likely be familiar with. From the tabloids, it does seem that this is maybe the most common reason for players losing it all, but that might be because it's a lot easier to sensationalize a messy divorce than just about anything else. Emmanuel Abue is the player we started this whole thing off with. How did he lose it all, you ask? Divorce. Wes Brown, formerly of Manchester United, two-time Champions League winner, reportedly lost a ton to divorce. Thierry Henry, Ryan Giggs, both players that have reportedly gone through messy divorces, costing tens of millions, depending on who you believe. But again, the top guys, they'll likely always be fine, I'd imagine. And not every divorce or broken relationship has the same result. Next up is loneliness, boredom, and anxiety. Probably the most overlooked reasons by fans. You're an extremely high income earner, but that comes with sacrifices. You're a club asset, you can't go clubbing, you can't drink, you can't ski, unless you're Manuel Neuer. You have a bedtime, you're not allowed to pee in public, unless you're Bernardo Silva.
Bernardo Silva! What are you doing, my friend?
Meanwhile, us normies are partying, eating food that they won't be allowed to eat, and living without the restrictions that come with being a pro. Your life is full of rigid routines. Where's the rush? Where's the excitement? What are you gonna do? The money is obviously great, but if you know anything about self-actualization, you'll know that countless studies have been done and confirmed that once your needs have been secured, money doesn't always equate to happiness. So you're rich and famous, yes, but you're also young, meaning that the doubts and anxieties that other young people have, you have them too. You might be surrounded by tons of people, but you also might be extremely lonely because of how few people can actually relate to you and your position and experiences. Fans see you and your teammates hugging and celebrating on TV, but behind the cameras, for all we know, you guys are nothing but work colleagues. In fact, you might not like each other at all. When you actually think about it, you realize that football teams are just combinations of people from all sorts of walks of life, continents, regions, ethnicities, religions. Some people just don't gel. So what do some players do to get that rush and relieve the stress? They gamble and they drink. Gambling is strictly prohibited for pro athletes, but it's pretty easy for them to do it without being caught, especially in the digital age when anyone can be anonymous online. Heck, you could end up playing Jadon Sancho in Ultimate Team, a form of gambling in itself. Gambling can start with plain boredom during away game journeys, just some cards with the lads, but it can quickly work its way up to being something drastic. Paul Merson, former Arsenal and Aston Villa star, lost £7 million through his gambling addiction at the peak of his career. Chris Sutton, former Premier League winner with Blackburn, had a huge problem himself, racking up tens of thousands in debt. My mum took control of my income for a time, and her solution was pretty drastic. She gave me £10 a day to live on, with no more access to cash. Excessive drinking is an obvious trap that triggers the downfall of an athlete, but it seems that in more cases that we may know, the problem never surfaces. In 2022, Wayne Rooney admitted to abusing alcohol at the peak of his career. Pressures laid upon him from a very young age were huge. According to him, his problems persisted until his first son was born in 2009. From 2004 to 2013-ish, the man was an absolute menace on the pitch. Who would have thought? A lot of former players have talked about how football is a harsh environment, often unsupportive of mental health issues because everyone's expected to be manly. Loneliness and isolation should come as no surprise. According to FIFPro in 2015, 38% of current professionals and 35% of former professionals reported experiencing feelings of depression or anxiety at some stage. Few speak up, and I honestly believe that those numbers are far too low. Poor investments and bad luck. Back to John Honorisa, who we mentioned earlier on, he went bankrupt in 2007 after a £3 million fraud investigation originating from his native Norway. From what it seems, it involved how his earnings were invested by a former agent who he cut loose in 2005. I couldn't gather much information about this case, as I imagine it was settled outside of the public eye, but who knows what happened. Even further to that, him or one of the many companies that he's been involved in have since been declared bankrupt on numerous occasions. He was once also sued by an ex-wife for illegally draining the college fund account for one of his children, make of that what you will. Back to the first part there, a lot of his companies weren't doing too well. Failed investments. You know, they say when you make millions, you should invest a significant portion of it diversely. But as we all know, there are good investments and there are bad investments. I keep coming back to this point, but it's for a good reason. If you're a pro football player and you've played football your entire life and nothing else, how are you going to know the difference between a good and a bad investment? There are people that have been in the finance community for years, decades, experts. They themselves can't tell the difference, you know? And what happens when someone that you think you can trust comes to you with these investment ideas? The final one we're going to talk about here is the most obvious one, the one that we are all guilty of regardless of the size of your pay packet: overspending. Roughly 40% of employees in the UK live paycheck to paycheck. Roughly 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. These figures run across the board too. It's not just the single mother of 4 that has to work 3 jobs in an impoverished area. It's also the multi-6-figure finance bro in his mid-30s that likes to spend and forget. I could pull these figures out all day about how they reflect across the world, but I'm pretty sure you guys get the idea. If this is happening to all of us, why would you think it wouldn't happen to pro ballers and athletes? We're all humans at the end of the day. Our nature doesn't discriminate by race, origin, gender, and most relevant to this piece, socioeconomic class. Another really interesting thesis I came across looked into the monetization of social relations between footballers, published in 2015. In it, current and former professional footballers with exposure to the 4 fully professional leagues in England were interviewed and questioned about their financial viewpoints. One question they were posed related to outward showings of wealth, i.e. flexing. An anonymous player involved in this study said, "I think it's important when you first sign for a club to make that first impression that you are a good player. An easy way to do that is your clothes, car, and stuff like that. Because if you have decent gear, then you have made a bit of money." So it seems that in the player community, there is a feeling that what you spend and how you look equates to your value as a teammate and as an asset. Peer pressure that could lead to grave financial consequences. Basically, players look to impress other players with ostensive showings of wealth before they even show what they can do on the training pitch. That is crazy. Graham Law, the author of this thesis, is a former Scottish pro footballer that played for teams like Tamworth and York City between 2003 and 2013. Because of his standing as a former pro, he was able to gain access to 34 past and present players for this study. A lot of them high profile too. And even considering that, he received a very high rejection rate, as over 100 letters were sent to clubs and media outlets calling for volunteers. Law goes on to state that much like normal society, discussions around wages and pay packets are mostly taboo in dressing rooms. Don't believe everything you read in the papers, because from what it seems, players themselves aren't always sure what their own teammates are earning. All of this seems to be part of a toxic loop involving players thinking that because the media says they have tons of money, they have to look the part, even when it's not the case. For all of the reasons stated in this video, it does start to make a bit of sense why these players tend to earn and lose generational wealth in the matter of a couple of years. I mean, it is lunacy. To you and me, it is lunacy, but you kind of have to understand, right? At least try and understand. Also, don't get me wrong, there are more than plenty success stories. Cristiano Ronaldo is a serial entrepreneur. Michael Jordan is a billionaire. But for every CR7 and MJ, there is a Ronaldinho and Allen Iverson. I don't have the stats for every sport, but I imagine there are many of the latter. Like I said, the Premier League and the PFA do give teachings on financial literacy and planning to youth and reserve players. It's part and parcel with media training, diversity training, mental and emotional well-being lectures, and everything in between. Clubs expose players to these learnings, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to the player themselves to decide what to do with their future and what to do with their money. You can't force someone to invest more than you can't force someone to watch Jujutsu Kaisen. It's a great show, you should watch it. In the Premier League, wealth management firms such as FLM seem to be responsible for this section of player teaching. At the root of it, Financial advice is something that requires an unbelievable amount of trust, which is why a lot of players employ their own family members as their financial advisors. This can be a good thing or a bad thing. Who's to say that the advisor, family or not, will have the correct intentions, morals, and ethics? It's a very, very tricky position to be in. It's like winning the lotto. Everyone's telling you what to do with your money, and everyone's telling you that they have your best interests at heart. Who's telling the truth? Closing this all off, if the numbers quoted in the news are even close to the real numbers, these guys are in a completely different stratosphere of earning when they are active. In 2020, the UK Office of National Statistics claimed that the average lifetime earnings of any given person in the UK is £566,000. It would take the average Premier League player about 9 weeks to earn that on base salary alone. Wild. But on that note, it's always important to remember that the higher you are, the more devastating the potential fall is. In the words of Ben Smith, head of FLM's Sports and Entertainment Desk, if you are introduced to a footballer at 25 who is already earning £100,000 a week, and tell them to start getting into sensible habits when they're already used to having that money and a certain lifestyle, well, that's too late. And there we have it. Let me know what you guys think about the crazy numbers and the state of player pay. Feel free to follow the socials, feel free to subscribe. That's all for me today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I will catch you in the next one.